black storm coming. See the lightning strike. Black people rising.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. This is part two of a two-part series that I started to introduce you to certain knowledge. Before I get started, let me introduce myself first. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and the purpose of this, and this is to the Umoja Circle. And since this is Black History Month, you know, I'm wearing an appropriate outfit that shows the great continent of Africa here. And I'll be focusing on the eastern part of Africa, northeastern part of Africa, called Kemet. And I kind of want you to understand that one of the purposes of Black History Month that Carter G. Woodson brought about was that throughout the year, you're supposed to study as much as you can, wherever you can. Then it's all up to each of us to come together during Black History Month to express what we've learned. And that's what I'm doing. But I study all year round anyway. But I want to bring this particular topic to the forefront. I started out talking about the concept of philosophy and where it really originated. Okay, again, my name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and welcome to the Umoja Circle, where we correct errors where errors are found, and we introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to who we are as people of African descent. You see in front of me two books. Okay, I'm putting them up on the screen. This is where we left off last time in part one of this show. This is the book Stolen Legacy, and the author is Dr. George G.M. James. And I really feel, let me just leave it on this for a little bit, that this book Stolen Legacy should be on the reference shelf of everybody's who is Black or who wants to understand the truth of our African history. Next to another great scholar, Sheikh Anta Diop, Dr. Obenga, in the origins of civilization, Marcus Garvey, any of these great scholars, this should be right up there with them. And the thing, the Stolen Legacy is about the Greek philosophy. He's putting in this book, and he does a great job. And the easy read. Greek philosophy is stolen Egyptian philosophy. No ifs, ands, buts about it. Okay, and there's another book that could be you should have and should read. It's called Black Athenia, the Afro-Asiatic Roots of Classical Civilization. In other words, he puts down also where the Greeks got their concepts and ideas that we today call Greek philosophy. It was not Greek philosophy. It had nothing to do with the Greek. In fact, last show, I mentioned that another great scholar, Dr. Obenga, and if you want to go back to the first part, you'll hear me say that the two words that make up the word philosophy, okay, philos and sophos, okay, philos meaning love of, and sophos meaning wisdom. Okay, love of wisdom, which put together give you the word philosophy. Dr. Obenga, one of the world-renowned linguists, did an etymological dictionaries of ancient Greeks, and he found out that philosophy is not even a Greek word. It doesn't even have a Greek etymology or origin. So if the word is not of Greece, where did it come from? He says, well, we should look to their teachers, and that's what we're going to do. Look to their teachers, who they said themselves was the ancient Egyptians. Maybe not what you were told when you were in school, but that's the truth. Okay, let's go on. And this is the the writer of the book, Dr. Martin Bernal, who wrote Black Atania. He was a professor. He's passed now in 2013, I think, of Cornell University. Okay. So let's go on. Now, last show I introduced you to many of these philosophers who I'm going to talk about. Okay, as we go on, you have Socrates, you have Thales, who's supposed to be the first one, and then you had Aristotle, Socrates, Pythagoras. You're familiar with his words. So let's hear what some of them had to say about this and other folks. Okay, this is one of the ones I also showed last week was Herodotus, who's considered the father of history. But anyway, Herodotus is on Greek borrowing from Egypt. He traveled throughout Egypt around 400 and something. Okay, and BC, and he saw. And he wrote that the ancient Egyptians that he talked to were black and had kinky hair. Okay, that was his physical, personal, one-on-one description. He also said Melipus, who was a wise man, acquired the art of divination, having become acquainted with the worship of Bacchus through knowledge derived from Egypt, introduced it to Greece. That's from history. That's his famous series of books. Book 2 of Herodotus' histories. He wrote it in there of his travels throughout Egypt, and how some of the Bacchus is actually a Greek, but it also was adopted by the Romans, who took everything from the Greeks. But the Greeks got that from a god that came out of Egypt when they were taught certain things. All right, let's go on to the next. Okay, this is Socrates' commentary. It is a book called Buris, Buris, I think it goes. And this is within that book that you could find today, Socrates, of whom Pythagoras, what makes him also important, he was a biographer of Pythagoras, okay? Of whom Pythagoras of Samos is one. On a visit to Egypt, he became a student of the religion of the people and was first to bring to the Greeks all philosophies, and more conspicuously than others, he seriously interested himself in sacrifice and in ceremonial purity. Socrates, Buris, that's that word, Busirus, 2730, Buris. But he also said in that same tome that Pythagoras went to the city of Heliopolis in Egypt, and he stayed there for 22 years. He actually literally went through the Kemetic mystery system, which produces the great priests, teachers, politicians. And he got all those ideas. And one of the things that the early Egyptians who did what you find in the book Stolen Legacy, you call it the Southern Bottom, the great good. That's the knowledge that they teach you. But it took them decades to do that. You think 4 years going to Harvard here is something else. It took them 20 years. And Pythagoras is one of the few who went through the whole system, okay? And he brought, as he said, he brought that information back. There's no writing by Pythagoras, which is interesting because none of the information that's given to the acolytes who then go through their different stages of learning for 20 years, it was all by memory. You did not write it down. You taught it. You memorized it. That's why it took so long. And he literally went through that process. Okay, this was around the 26th dynastic period of Egypt. Okay, so Yes, he's one of the few that I'll give some props. At least he tried to go through the process. Okay, but he didn't learn that in Greece. He learned that in Egypt. Okay, according to Isocrates. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Now, this lady, Flora Lugard, is interested. In 1906, she wrote a book. Now, she was the wife of one of the colonial governors. I can't remember which country that was colonized during the late 1800s and early 1900s. But she had the leisure to travel around the area, and she came up and found the same thing that everybody who looked deep, not too deep, just beneath the surface of the lies that Greeks created everything, always find a black civilization or black thought or black teaching the rest of the world. The influence of the civilization spread from Ethiopia. That's one of the many names that was given to Africans from the Europeans. The Greeks called them Ethiopia. Ethiopus means burnt skin. Ethi meaning burnt, and opius meaning skin, to ancient Egypt and thence to Europe. Okay, page 226 of her book. She writes that at the remote period of history, the leading race of the Western world was a black race. Okay, can't get any straighter than that. I'm not saying it. I'm not making it up. This lady who is during the Victorian period, a wife of the governor of one of the colonial countries. I don't know if it's Nigeria or Ghana, but she is the wife of a governor who wrote a book. So let's go on to the next one. Okay? This is what the Greeks themselves said they learned from black Egyptians, and they called them that. Geometry, mathematics, medicine, law, architecture, philosophy, astronomy, religion, all these came out of the thousands of years of developing humans. The earliest human beings, again, came out of Africa, Homo sapiens sapiens. Some left at about 80,000 years and went up into the other parts of the world, and because of environmental issues, they developed certain traits that distinguishes all the different human species we have today. Not different races, only one race, the human race. But the ones who left behind, who were there for thousands and thousands of years, developed this. The geometry itself was developed, and it's said in many books, including this book and this book that I have in front of me, that the geometry was a way of, the Nile flooded, okay, and the land was covered with water, same time every year, okay? And they had to find out how to, who owns what and what the land was shaped like before the inundation. So these type of geometric mathematics came out of that. Took them thousands of years to do this. Okay, they also associated certain stars with the flooding. So that's where, astronomy came out. Look at the stars and see what happened on the earth. This took thousands of years. These are the same people that look like me, look like many of you out there, but you're not being taught that. You don't understand that. Most of us hate math, or we don't understand that medicine. You go there, I went to Egypt about a decade ago, and on the walls you see things that definitely look like medical equipment, stethoscopes and birthing chairs. It's carved in the stone on the walls of temples to this day. Let's go on. Okay, this is what I'm going to expound about, the evidence of African origins of geography. This will say it better than I tried to say it. For example, geometry was invented, it is said, from the measurement of land which is made necessary by the Nile when it confounds the boundaries or overflows it. At the time of its overflow, it happens every year, inundation. This science then is believed to have come to the Greeks from the Egyptians. This is Strabo. This is a Roman geographer, okay? All right. His writing, 2,000 years ago, Strabo, okay? Look it up. Again, let's go on. Okay, this is about mathematics. Aristotle himself wrote this, okay, as he plundered the libraries of Egypt. Now, you have this information prior to him coming in with Alexander, but this is what he talked about afterwards. All right, the science which relates neither to pleasure nor yet to the necessities of life were invented first in those places where men had leisure. Thus, the mathematical science originated in Egypt because there the priestly class had leisure. And I want to bring that point out a little later on, if I have time, to expound on the fact that you got to have a type of environment where you can't be at war or running for your lives or constantly in fighting to be able to come up with these. You have to have quiet time, meditative time. So that means your society has to be at peace. You can't say that about the Greeks. They were constantly at war with the city-states of each other. The Persians, the Peloponnesian War, there was Peloponnesian League, Ionic League, all these different types of leagues fighting constantly, all during the time of this period of when philosophy was supposed to have been established. You can't have what peace when you're running for your life when Athens is burning, or you got some foreign troops coming in, like the Persians, who conquer you, and you're making deals, or the Spartans who don't like the Athenians, who don't like the Memphians. All this stuff is not conducive to what he said, those places where men had leisure. Let's go on. Okay, like I'm saying, the period of Greek philosophy, which is around 640, which is Thales, to 322, that's the death of Aristotle, just a period of time that this great philosophical blooming of the mind that happened in Greek, supposedly, according to teachers in Western culture, was a period of internal and external wars by the Greek city-states. Just like I said, the Greek city-states were constantly at war, not a place of leisure. As Aristotle himself said, he found amongst the ancient Egyptian priests. They had the time and the peace, unless they were invaded by outsiders, as was the case later on in Egyptian history. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, how come as a body of men, from the earliest of the Greek philosophers, Thales to Aristotle, they were all undesirable to the state authorities, persona non grata, or an unwelcome person? And this is another point that many black scholars and many scholars of who speaks the truth about Greek philosophy, they were persecuted by the Greek government. Athens killed Aristotle. Athens made Plato run for his life. All the Greek philosophers, because what they were told, they're bringing in foreign ideas. How come you're not taught this in your philosophy classes at these institutions? They were all undesirable. They weren't held up in high esteem like people are today. And again, this type of attitude about the Greek philosophers is a recent thing. Again, during the 17th and 18th and 1900s in academia, to show somehow that that the Western way of thinking, that's all propaganda nonsense. During the period of time these poor guys were living, they ran for their lives because they brought this information from Egypt, and the Greeks said, no, the Greek government itself said, no, you're bringing all this foreign stuff. We don't want that, okay? But how could the people who felt like that, governments who felt like that, be the purveyors of great thinking called philosophy? Even the word, again, philosophy, is not a Greek word. The two words that make up the word philosophy are not Greek words. Let's go on to the next one. persona non grata. They were all consequently persecuted, driven into hiding and secrecy when they began to teach this foreign knowledge claimed by the Greeks' authority. Example given, Socrates, Plato were both attacked and persecuted by the city-state of Athens for introducing foreign doctrines into Athens. In fact, all the so-called Greek philosophers were also attacked by their Greek governments because they were city-states, separate governments. Let's go on. Okay, Anaxagoras was another philosopher, was imprisoned and exiled. Socrates was executed. Plato was sold into slavery, and Aristotle was indicted and exiled. That's why he was running around with Alexander. He couldn't hang out in Athens anymore. He spent the rest of his life in Egypt, in Alexandria, okay? While the earliest of them all, Pythagoras, was expelled from Corinth in Italy. Can we imagine the Greeks making such an about turn as to claim the very teachings which they had first persecuted and openly rejected? Certainly, they knew they were usurping what they had never produced, and as we enter the step-by-step into our study, the greater we find this truth. All right, let's go on to the next one. Okay, again, Aristotle died in 322, not many years after he had been aided by Alexander the Great to secure the largest quantity of scientific books from the royal libraries and temples of Egypt. In spite, however, of such great intellectual treasures, the death of Aristotle marked the death of philosophy among the Greeks, who did not seem to possess the natural ability to advance these sciences. Consequently, history informs us that the Greeks were forced to make a study of ethics, which they also borrowed from the Egyptian, the summum bonum, or the greatest good, that you find this in Dr. James's book. The two other Athenian philosophers must be mentioned here. I mean, Socrates and Plato, who also became famous in history as philosophers and great thinkers. Every schoolboy believed that when he hears the word and read the command, know thyself, I said this earlier, he is hearing or reading words which were uttered by Socrates. But the truth is that the Egyptian temples carried inscriptions on the outside addressed to the neophytes. These are the people, the young boys who were going in to learn to become priests for 20 years. And among them was the injunction, know thyself. Socrates copied these words from the Egyptian temples and was not the author at all. All mystery temples inside and outside Egypt carried such inscriptions, just like the weekly bulletins of our modern churches, okay? Know thyself is Egyptian. It's black people who gave this to the world. And it's our turn to set the record straight. That's what I try to do here at the Umoja Circle. Let's go on to the next. This pretty much said the same thing. Let's go on to the next one. After nearly 5,000 years of prohibition against the Greeks, they were permitted to enter Egypt for the purpose of their education. First through the Persian invasion, and secondly through the invasion of Alexander the Great from the 6th century BC, therefore to the death of Aristotle, which happened in 322 BC. The culture, the Greeks, made the best of their chance to learn all they could about Egyptian culture. Most students received instruction directly from the Egyptian priests, but after the invasion of Alexander the Great, the royal temples and libraries were plundered and pillaged, and Aristotle's school converted the library at Alexander into a research center. There is no wonder then that the production of the unusually large number of books ascribed to Aristotle has proved a physical impossibility for any single man within a lifetime. This is what I said earlier. This is here in writing, that Aristotle and his Metaphysics, which is the book, and all his writing in something like 18 or 19 different disciplines, that he showed no evidence of this type of knowledge prior to him coming in with Alexander. And once he got access to these libraries, he didn't go anywhere else. He didn't go to plunder the library of India. He plundered the libraries of Egypt. And Alexander took on the role of an Egyptian pharaoh. And all the generals who took after Alexander's death became pharaohs. The one who General Soter, the one who took over what is now Egypt, when they were breaking up all the conquered lands that were conquered by Alexander, he became the first Ptolemy. Okay, the last one was the Ptolemy the 13th. I'm trying to remember. So many of them. Okay, Ptolemy the 13th. I mean, that's the brother of Cleopatra, and she clashed with him. And that's how the Romans entered through Julius Caesar and Mark Antony and their affair with her. When you say Cleopatra is black, she supported her country, but she is a descendant of the Greeks and Alexander. And everybody from Alexander until Cleopatra were Greeks. They might have had black concubines, but they were a Greek people, okay, of Greek descent. She was mixed, all right? Queen Nefertiti, Queen T of the 18th dynastic period, those were sisters, okay? A lot of the mummies that you can find of the black women with braids and what have you, still on them to this day. You can find in museums and where we have. And then once the Romans took over, then their soldiers took it, and the ancient Egyptian name like Al-Sar became Osiris, and Al-Set became Isis. And that cult was sent with the Roman soldiers, and then until the edict of Theodosius, he closed down all the Greek temples, and then the Justinian put the nail in the coffin because they were enhancing this other sect that came out called Christianity. Okay, there's a whole lot that I left out, and it's up to you. Start with these books here. So I'm going to stop it right here, and I hope I gave you a little insight for this Black History Month. So until next time, peace, Hotep, bye-bye.